taken in Super 8, transferred to video, where he added the music and the narration, then transferred to DVD. He did all the transferring himself because it was more cost effective. And so he purchased a lot of contraptions, as he calls them, so he could have more of a hands-on feel to the project. You can kind of hear the stuff when he's punching stuff and knocking stuff over and over. Anyone that knows my father is well aware he's always recording history. He's always taking pictures. Personal family history, church events, picnics, parades, and programs. Dr. Robinson mentioned, when I donated the material, it was on DVD. It was an hour's worth of stuff. You know, us in the kitchen, eating, having fun in the backyard. So I just told him, I said, the video you want is probably 5 minutes in, you know, so he wouldn't have to look at all the stuff, but obviously he did. He also had included on the video, this is, you know, Go Hornets, a video of the marching Hornets going down South Jackson before they could go down Dexter. Anyone, like I said, anyone knows that he always takes pictures, videos, and everything, so for him to capture this historical moment was of no surprise to us. Again, thanks to Dr. Robinson, to Alabama State, for inviting me and my father, so you could watch this little home movie as he saw it. Daddy? He didn't really know he was speaking.
You all have seen the home movies, and it's usually said to be seen, stand up, to be appreciated, sit down. Again, thank you for observing the movie.
Yeah, there is, I think, compelling footage of the parade up Jackson Street, the Turkey Day, I guess it's Turkey Day parade up Jackson Street, and of the football game, both the game and the band on the field. So we are delighted to have that type of materials. I've never seen it before. I've never seen, you know, 50-year-old imagery of Alabama State University's band and the football team. So we're just so indebted to people who think about how to preserve these treasures and to make them accessible to a wider public. Our next presenter is going to come to us via Skype, and this is Kenneth Love. Kenneth Love is a documentarian, filmmaker. Since 1976, he's done films that have been shown in many venues, the Museum of Modern Art, the Louvre, the Guggenheim, the Dildo in Spain. I have to look that up, where the Dildo was. He's won Emmy Awards for individual achievement in National Geographic specials of the Serengeti Diary and the Realm of the Alligator. He's received Emmy nominations for Living Treasure of Japan, Egypt, Quest for Eternity, Ballad of the Irish Horse, Chesapeake Born. So his interests are varied. He's also a photographer, and he loves still photography, and he's presented, or his photographs have been presented in the National Geographic. He has photographed a number of luminaries and politicians. He's photographed Bill and Hillary Clinton, Nancy Reagan, the King of Spain, Leonard Bernstein, U.B. Blake, just the Wynton Marsalis. So he has certainly some expertise in filmmaking and photography and other visuals. Mr. Love contacted us. He heard about the work we were doing in cooperation with the National Park Service and also in celebrating the voting rights campaign. And he had been collecting interviews over time relative to the campaign. Now, what was interesting about some of the images that he collected is that they captured the student part of the protest. And so one of the arguments that we made here at Alabama State University that was part of the reason why the National Park Service chose Alabama State University as the third interpretive site is because we demonstrated how critical the student component of the movement was for the voting rights campaign. In that you had Alabama State students who marched on several occasions during the month of March 1965. You had Tuskegee students, about 800 Tuskegee students come to Montgomery. Then was spring break, and SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, put a call out to students from around the nation, and they descended. About 17,000 went to Washington, D.C. Others started to protest around the nation, and thousands came to Montgomery. So you had literally thousands of students in Montgomery protesting almost on a daily basis for several weeks. This was part of the larger picture of protest that the nation, that the president saw, that Congress saw, and interpreted as a nation that was demanding the Voting Rights Act. So the student movement was a critical part of the passage of the Voting Rights Act. And so Kenneth Love captured some of the students who participated in those episodes. He also tells the story of a reporter, a black reporter, who marched, and Kenneth Love was making the argument that this is the only black reporter or one of two black reporters who made the entire 50-mile march from Selma to Montgomery. Mr. Love also has some cutting-edge technology he'd like to share with us today in terms of some 3D work he's doing. So we're delighted to have and to present for you Mr. Kenneth Love. He's going to give you some context for the materials he's going to show. We're going to show you a several-minute clip, and then he's going to give some commentary. Mr. Love.
Good morning. Could you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. Yes, we're gonna give you an opportunity. Do you want to do some setup here?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm going to turn down my sound a little bit. I want to thank Dr. Robinson and Alabama State University for having me present here. And I must start just by saying I have to give credit where credit is due. And it was my son in high school that got me interested in this subject. And that was because the famous photographer Charles Moore came to his high school and gave a lecture. And he said to me, "Dad, you have to come to this lecture. This is important." I had other job that day, but my wife told me to go, and I went. And this project that I'm working on is a result of that opportunity to meet and interview Charles Moore. I'm usually on the other side of the camera, so forgive me if I mess up. But the presentation that I'm giving to you is today is a 12-minute film presentation in 5 parts. The first part is a radio journalist who walked the 54 miles. In my research, there were only 2 black journalists who walked the march. One was the famous Pulitzer Prize Montana Sleep photographer who was reporting for Ebony and Jet, and one was a gentleman, George Barber from Pittsburgh. And in the interview, the first segment, part 1, 3 minutes, it was actually my son who interviewed him on camera. I was on camera. My son conducted the interview in my house. Part 2 is the only Canadian journalist who took pictures in the march. And one of the ideas that I'm presenting for possible inclusion as an exhibition in this center is that the first thing you'll see in part 2 is a photograph of Dr. King. And what I propose in this segment is that I'm going to Canada this summer to show him my work so far on it. And I propose that we film him printing a photographer in wet printing. He is the only photographer that I believe who took pictures now that currently has the capability to print pictures. And for the exhibition, I propose a short segment, 3 minutes of him printing, and then having his pictures on the wall, so students in the future will see how the technology changed and evolved. Because this is very important. I think it's the only opportunity to get this, and I think it would make a contribution. So the first, in part 2, you'll see that photograph up there for 3 or 4 seconds. It will say picture to print. Part 3 is the 3D segment that we are working on for presentation. And the key to this in terms of the new, I've been working on 3D films for 2 years now, but the key to this in the state-of-the-art technology is to show it on a no glasses 3D. Museums can't have glasses for many reasons. You can't pass them around. People want to put them on their heads and it doesn't work. But this no glasses technology is transformative, and I think it's a transformative way for these visuals to appeal to younger students. And in part 3, the first photograph is people walking down the street, and you'll see it flat 2D. But we've done tests on this 2D, and in the 2D, it all separates, so you have layers, and you see the hands touching, and it's so powerful that I am very positive and excited that we should pursue this. The fourth part of what I'm showing, which is also 3 minutes, is a segment of longer film that Dr. Robinson asked me to include. And the reason I think this is really important is by making a film, not all the material that you film for the film gets in the final film. But by making a larger film, you have material that could be put aside for future expeditions and future study. And the students, there's not that many students, the students who were there in their 70s and 80s, and I think it's really important to chronicle them now. The last part, part 5, is only 30 seconds, and it's something I just put there in at the last minute. I had the privilege of interviewing the photographer James Corrales, actually on another subject. Mr. Corrales took the famous picture of, it was really taken in the last 10 minutes of the march, and it's a low-angle picture of people walking and the storm clouds overhead. And that was the famous picture that was used in Eyes on the Prize. And in my talk, I had a brief discussion with Dr. Robinson yesterday, and he said you're considering on using that picture for other other purposes. But I researched it a lot, and I have the only, on the internet, I could not find him speaking about this picture at all. So I think it's important. So right now, so if you want to ask me questions, I recommend you this part 1, remember the parts about questions, and I think now we could show you the 12-minute piece. Should I turn off my camera?
No, you leave the camera on, and if you feel compelled, we can stop the video.
I think we should. I think it's set up well, and
okay.
and we should just run right through it because it's easier.
Okay.
So at the staff meeting, it was pointed out we weren't going to send anybody to cover this Selma to Montgomery March because it was too dangerous. And I spoke up and said I'll go, and started pointing out the fact that every occupation has a hazard. The policeman, the fireman, and education at that time. And there was quite a reaction because here I am, the only black in the room, black reporter, and Jack Ways, a dear friend. He said, you go.
I don't hear it as a
reporter. You the
yes.
feather. And so I kept talking about the occupational hazards. I found myself on a plane headed for Montgomery scared stiff.
To cover the story, I did like the Freedom Marchers. Slept out one night on frozen ground in 2 inches of mud the following. Walked through blistering sun, rain showers, and ate oatmeal and peanut butter
We can
sandwich.
see and hear you.
I talked and walked and then dropped out. Neither did others?
I don't think we've had any large number of people to drop out. Maybe one or two people have dropped out because of sickness or bad feet, but for the most part, the 300 people have been very consistent and made almost every step of the way.
That was John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Mrs. Eddie Myers of Marion, Alabama, who was asked why she was marching.
Well, we want to get to march for freedom's sake, a better time in this world. Because I'm in my 60s, and you know I came the hard way.
Are you registered to vote?
No, I have made a trial 3 times and I failed.
What happened there?
Well, every time they send it back some improper question answered or something other.
How about the intimidations that you faced all along the way?
Well, I was in the movement of the tear gas, and my daughter, she was knocked out in the hospital in Selma. And so we want some better days home.
And there was a woman who may have started it all. After receiving a standing ovation, Mrs. Rosa Parks rose to greet the audience.
You see before you now a victim of all that has been perpetrated against one to make us less than human.
And there was John Lewis, leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
But we'll stand to the state of Alabama today, we'll stand to Governor Wallace, that we're tired of being voiceless. We're tired of being invisible in the political arena in the state of Alabama, that we want to participate in this government. And we want to do that right here and now.
Veteran civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph had this to say.
This is the greatest demonstration for civil rights ever held in this land. It is a mandate that all of us should continue to march on to the land, the promised land of freedom. We shall overcome.
I was told there was a white demonstration about to happen. I went to downtown Montgomery. I was more than shocked because there was a parade coming up the street led by a Falcon convertible with 3 women with their hair in curlers. One lady was holding a sign with a character of an African cannibal with a bone in his nose with a sign saying, "Will this be our new Uncle Sam?" And on the right was another lady, hair in curlers, with a sign, "Nigger, go home." Men came along just back to the left of it, led by a man in a suit and a young boy to the left of him with a stride and glare on his face at me. And behind the young fellow was another man, and his sign was, who needs niggers? Then further back on the right, the women came along, and their signs are some of them even worse than the men's sign. And the men never yelled at any blacks they passed, but the women, when they walked by and there was some black people on the street, they just opened up with verbal abuse that I couldn't even repeat, like it was disgusting. So as a Canadian, seeing this, and a newsman that took wire photos from all these things and not seeing it before, even today, you can't even grasp what these people were thinking, what was going on. You know, it was just so different. Several times that day, I was called an agitator. It was a feeling that you had to watch out because the way people looked at you and being called agitator and stuff, you knew that you weren't welcome there. When I came back with the pictures, no one would use them. I was almost considered a racist just because I had photographed them. And people wouldn't even consider it, like they were disgusted with it. And the next day, there was a small civil rights demonstration from the black area of Montgomery, and they went to the Capitol with their signs. I think every sign said "One man, one vote." When they got to Capitol Hill, they were barred from getting off the roadway onto the lawn or the sidewalk by state troopers. And one of the leaders, Willie Ricks, approached a state trooper and say, "My name's Willie Ricks." And I can remember it plain as day. I'm from Tennessee. Please let me on the sidewalk. He tried that several times. "My name's Willie Ricks. I'm from Tennessee. Please let me on the sidewalk." Governor Wallace says I can walk on the sidewalk. "Please let me on the sidewalk." Not a word, like no response at all. They just stood there glaring at him. The city police then came along, told him in no uncertain terms, "Get on the sidewalk, or off the road, arrested. So they tried again to get off the road, and they were denied access. And Patty Lanning came and arrested just the leaders and a few of them until they filled it up. It was only like a small van. And I heard that they were just detained for a short while and then they were released.
We were marching once again to try to get to the state capitol. And at one point, there was somehow separated from the larger group. And we were from the black group now to the white group. The police who were following us along anyway, they would walk along with us as we marched, essentially surrounded us on three sides. The fourth side was houses. It wasn't silence. I mean, we were singing and that sort of thing. There were bombs, you know. There was a certain tension, I think, that was building up. Galway, being the humanist that he is, in feeling that there's good in all people, I suppose, decided that he could engage one of the troopers.
I just, said, funny of us being, funny all of us being here in the silence. And, are you from here? It's like talking to an animal, and all I get is that whole time.
Our leadership suggested that we disperse. And somehow when we stood up and we were getting ready to march back, the order came to attack.
Sheriff's deputies came in on horseback. I do know that one man on horseback had a marshal's uniform on, or a police kind of uniform on. Some had clubs. One man had a cane, like a walking cane. They were in civilian clothes, on big horses. And they beat some of these students terribly. SNCC had sent out a call for white students from the north to come down. So you had this mixture of black students who knew what was up, because this was their territory, and they'd grown up here, and they knew who the man was, and they knew what the risks were. And you had naive white students like me from Pennsylvania and Ohio and California, and who were being exposed to this for the first time.
I was totally committed to going down there and to really to put a stake in the heart of the beast.
You really did have the sense that history was just ready to change. I mean, it just needed a little more push. And if you didn't choose to put your body on the line, then you were part of the stagnation, the anti-momentum of the establishment, which said, no, we've been this way for how many years, we're going to stay.
The hierarchy of getting beaten started with white men and then black men and white women. Being a white male, I was, of course, a target.
Get down on the ground. Get your hands on top of your head, which is a very vulnerable place. Your elbows out in front to protect your eyes and your face from disfigurement. And then to bring your knees up into your belly.
I knew nothing about the civil rights movement, virtually nothing before I went down there. I can remember my first exposure, which was from a lifelong friend at Harvard. And one day I noticed him on campus with a little button on his sport coat, and it was the SNCC symbol. The SNCC symbol, of course, was a black hand and a white hand together.
I quickly came to realize that it was the northern white that were actually hated even more than the black.
The hate that we encountered and saw in people's faces, I mean, a mask of hate, contorted faces and viciousness on the part of not just men, by the way, but some women that we encountered.
I saw just out of the corner of my eye, I saw the face of that guy I'd been talking to, and just a glimpse, and then whack, he hit me across the face,
and Harriet thinks he was aiming for my eye.
And blood just began to come. I went to him, and I had, by this time I found something, some sort of rag, and gave him to try to put it to his face. And at that moment, when I come to him, that's when the picture was taken.
Then I saw another bleeding, and what I saw that was very heart-rending, I mean, it was the face of a young black student woman that was tending to him, and she had so much pain in her face.
It was serendipitous that Charles Moore took that picture at that time. Had he not taken the picture, quite frankly, we could have come and gone, and no one would have ever known.
It's a classic photograph of the Selma March, as the marchers coming over a knoll with the big cloud overhead. Yes, I took that.
Yes. That's a nice outfit you have on. I think we were moved by the various clips and the images. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. And I know you want to take just a minute to do some commentary, and then we're going to take some questions for all of our panelists, yourself, Dr. Winston, and Mr. Hereford. So you wanted to do a follow-up commentary, short follow-up.
Sure, I'd like to do follow-up 2 points. One, I wanted to show, if you can see this is the exact model of the tape recorder that George Barber, the radio journalist, had. And here's his tape in it. And you could actually see where it says Day in Selma, which he carried. So this, I think, might be possible to have included in the exhibit if that part makes it. The other thing is, I have to tribute the photographers who took those pictures, which was Charles Moore, and most importantly, just because I'd like to just talk about Glenn Percy, who took many of those pictures of the students. And Glenn passed away about 2 weeks ago, and it affected me in a deep way, and because his contribution is so important. And I had planned to do many more interviews with him, but time didn't allow it. And that's why I want to underline how important it is to chronicle the students who were involved in that activities now. And thank you for your time.
I do want to say, Glenn Piercy, we were familiar with Mr. Piercy, and we contacted him, and he gave us permission to use his photographs they're now at the
Smithsonian.
The Smithsonian. And so we had the 50th, every 50 years, you have a golden anniversary class that comes back for graduation at Alabama State. And we wanted to have those images, because a lot of those images, those students were in the images. And we wanted them to help us identify some of the individuals. Glenn Piercy wanted us to help him, and the Smithsonian asked us to help. And so we did present Glenn Piercy's images at a luncheon for the class of 1965. And so we were sad to hear that of his passing. But I think that Mr. Love makes a good point, in that a number of you, we've captured your oral histories, but we want to redouble our efforts to capture those oral histories so that your stories could live in perpetuity. And so this is part of our mission. I do, Mary Boone, I'd like to say hi. Reverend Boone, who worked with us for such a long time and was an activist, was a field secretary in the voting rights campaign, was a front man, which meant that he moved ahead of the march and organized marches. He organized almost 1,000 students at Alabama State to cross town and to meet the marchers. And so a lot of our work, I think, was assisted and aided by Reverend Boone, and we do not forget Reverend Boone. We honor him. I have developed